So thanks for joining us for this video. We're going to talk about a really fun topic, septic tanks and septic systems.
And poop.
And poop. Well, the general topic of poop. The reason we wanted to create this video is because we wanted to document the why behind our septic system.
A big reason for that is because we did not plan on doing this so soon. We thought that we'd probably get it done within the first 6 months to a year, and we thought we'd have probably a well drilled first and solar panels, and septic may come last, but quickly we realized that we needed to move it up the priority list for a lot of the reasons we're going to explain in this video.
Yeah, we had a plan. You know, we went into this whole thing with a plan. We kind of talked about it. We wrote it all down, and we had this vision for how things might go. But we knew as soon as we get here, reality would set in, and the whole thing would definitely kind of take shape, if you will. So we wanted to share this with you because anybody going on this journey, you know, we can share with you our experiences. That doesn't mean it'll be your experience, it'll fit your plan or not, but there's a lot of valuable information we've already learned that we can share with you.
It just might give you a few extra things to think about because a lot of this we didn't think about until the time came.
Yeah, we're kind of rolling with it. I mean, we don't have anybody really to look to for a lot of guidance. That's kind of why we're documenting this journey. We find a lot of stuff on the internet, of course, but we're trying to be a little bit more clear and more precise or concise about this journey and what it's looked like for us. So before we get too far, I actually wanted to just make one other point. The real meat of this video is not just why we decided to install a septic system, but why we decided to hire a contractor to install the septic system.
Very important distinction.
And why we decided to pull a permit. So we'll try to cover that in here, and I think those are really contentious points for a lot of people who are on this journey, who are passionate about off-grid or passionate about homesteading. There is some common sense to this journey. We're not complete bumbling idiots, so
try not to be.
We want to share the reasons behind our work, and hopefully that will benefit you and help you on your journey. So the first thing on our list is what we call romantics, and anybody who's been researching or following a journey like this, it gets really exciting. Like you can just feel it in your bones. You really want to be a homesteader.
And every time people talk about doing things themselves, they talk about how romantic it is just because it's so pure, and that's a lot of the allure to this type of lifestyle, is that you do a lot of it yourself and it's romantic, and you could say I built this and I built that, but you want to be careful not to be a superhero because we aren't, and that would likely lead to increased odds of you giving up because they're simply in over your head.
Yeah, there's just something to be said for kind of going about this journey in a very practical manner, especially if you're coming from a lifestyle like us where you don't have a lot of these amenities, where they're not something that you touched. They were kind of there when you got there. And you know, believe it or not, there are people in the world who do not know where their poop goes when they flush the toilet. We did know, but that doesn't mean we understand the fundamentals of how the entire system works, competent enough to actually install it. So with this journey, we don't want to get all romantic about it all and say, oh, we're going to do everything. We're going to cut our own
Not
bricks.
to mention, we're already doing so much. We're in over our heads. We're running out of daylight every single day. So this is one thing that, for the reasons we'll talk about throughout this video, is why we decided to let some contractors do it rather than us try to figure it out ourselves.
Yeah. Making lumber is fun. There's a lot of things you can do that are fun, but really weigh the risk of it all. So romantics is the first bullet point there. Just don't fall in love with trying to do everything yourself. You may be setting yourself up for failure.
The next thing we want to talk about is the reason for the permit. Some of you have been following this journey and know that we're a little bit skeptical because we're those type of people that really don't want the government butting in on our business, telling us what we can and can't do. On the other hand, we also know that a lot of these things are implemented because they do have some sort of good, some of them, not all. And this is one of those things that we kind of realize there is some good in it. All septic permits are public record, so we realize that our neighbors, if they don't have a permit, we really have no idea where their septic system is. Maybe they know, maybe they don't. Maybe there has been a septic system put in that they're unaware of, and maybe it's right where we want to drill our well. So we realize that that actually could be a good thing, that you really know the history of your property and where your neighbors are, because I don't know about you, but I would be really pissed off if we spent, I don't know, $8,000 on a well and the whole thing was contaminated.
Yeah, that was something that we didn't know initially. You know, we were very reluctant to the permitting process, and even to this day, I still have this little feeling inside of me that just is a little bit angry about the whole process.
We're still skeptical, but we have our permit.
Yeah, I mean, the permitting process, when I did a little bit of my own research, I just ignored what they were saying because their response basically was, if you don't, it's illegal. But that's not a response. That's silly. I want to know logical, common sense reasons. And so After doing a little bit of research, I actually was able to look at the public records website and see that some of my neighbors have septic systems. In fact, actually, I'm pretty sure most all of them do, but only some of them were public record. And why that was important to me was I was able to determine where they're located. And that's such a valuable piece of information. So, for example, if somebody maybe were to sell a piece of property 2 times, which can happen, and somebody forgot where the septic system is, that could be a problem. So making it public record, it doesn't excite us, and it's not something we were passionate about, but we do see some value in it. So we'll just say that.
And then in the permitting process, the inspector, she actually helped us determine where the best spot to put our septic system was, and then also talked to us about runoff and setbacks and some of those things we did not know. So that's another thing that benefited us, is that we now believe that our septic system is in the best spot possible.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors to be considered here, and we with the permit, it wasn't the permit, so I guess we want to be really clear about that. We weren't after the piece of paper. We were after, the information to make sure that we're making the right decision for our property. And it just so happens that as a course of getting a permit, an inspector does come out and they do a lot of these things for you. So we see that more as a service. So maybe we can say that. We were looking for the service of an inspector. The permit, we still aren't passionate about that. It is what it is. But the benefits of having that permit drawn are practical, so it's something that
and not to mention a lot of installers
about.
Will not install without a permit, and we didn't want to install it ourselves, so all these things are really tied together.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of the big reason there for the permit. There's a lot of other things we'll kind of discuss in more detail later, such as lessons we learned. So maybe we can jump to that. Well, let's jump to the next bullet point.
The next thing we want to talk about is education. To us, education is priceless, and we figured that one perk to having a contractor install it is that we have not done this before, nor have we seen it done, and we could watch all sorts of YouTubes, but ultimately we figured that if we hired someone to do it, we could kind of job shadow them, and they said that was perfectly okay. So we stood over their shoulder the entire time, and we learned about how to install at least this septic system, and we learned what is it called, like the drops that you need.
The elevation. Yeah, there's a lot of technical data, and you can read the state's information. They provide guidelines for the permits and all that stuff, and you can read the company's website that provides the tank, and you can do all this stuff. But I mean, there's so many little details here. What size of rock do you need? How deep is the drain field? How deep can you put the tank? What elevation does the pipe need to drain at? So there's a lot of technical details there that we thought if we could see this done one time and just really kind of touch it and see it in action, the common sense part of it all would all start to come together. You can read a book for a while, but at some point you kind of got to see something take place.
I think one thing we learned was that we were going to put the septic system right up to the hillside because we do have a limited amount of flat space here, and we want to utilize as much of it as possible. And in doing so, we would have had runoff issues from the hillside, and that would have resulted in potentially a failed septic system. So because we hired a contractor and an inspector, that's something that we did not learn from the internet, although I'm sure we could have learned that if we spent hours researching, but we didn't.
Yes, and also we learned a lot of things about drain fields, leach fields, how they work, depth, types of soil.
How far apart to space them, soil drainage.
Yeah, system sizing was a question. A lot of people have asked that too, like, oh, how big is it? Well, that there actually isn't a de facto answer for the size of a septic system. It really
depends on the size of your house, the number of bedrooms that you have, and then also the location and the soil type that you have.
Yeah, and there's a lot of factors like Alyssa was mentioning. We have a lot of elevation on our property, which initially is a blessing, but when it comes to septic systems, it can get to be a bit of a nuisance because there's a lot of surface and groundwater around us, and the elevation we have actually slopes off to that groundwater. We also have a hillside behind us, and so because we're prone to having snow in this climate, that could potentially cause oversaturation of the soil where the drain field is located. And these drain fields rely on the ability to percolate. That's why they call it a percolation test. If it can't percolate, your system will fail and it'll back up into your house. That's a very expensive mistake.
We were also going to do, what's it called, like the half dome system?
Oh, yeah.
What's that called?
Yeah, it's called like a Gravelless dome system, which, when you do your research on the internet, you're like, oh, well, that seems 1,000 times easier than putting all this rock in there.
Which is what we probably would have done, but we talked to both two different people, the contractor and the inspector, and they both said it does not work in this area. They're pulled up constantly. It's just something about the area and the soil type. We do not recommend it. So we're really happy that they gave us that advice.
Yeah, and honestly, that was something I can kind of add a little detail to that too. I happened to be looking through the public records at septic permits, and I happened to notice that a nearby home had recently pulled a replacement permit. And I looked at the information on the previous system, and it was put in about 15 years ago. That's important. And the system that they were replacing was a Gravelless dome system, and it was only 15 years old, and here they were having to replace the entire system, and it's only been 15 years. In theory, if this system is designed and installed properly, you should get somewhere around 25 to 30 years of useful life. So that situation, I don't know when it failed on them, but they got less than half of the functional life of that system than they should have. And this was something that the contractor knew from working in this area for 25 years. You just can't pay money for that kind of advice. And the inspector agreed. She said there's something about this area, right here specifically where we are, that system just does not work.
I think that's just summing it up. Even if you think it's a little bit more money to hire a contractor to do it, just think of it as education, and education is priceless.
Yeah, and that really kind of goes into the next bullet point of making mistakes. You know, with anything that you're doing, there's always a level of risk, and some mistakes are easier to fix than others. In this particular situation, one mistake, and you might not even know you made a mistake for a year or two, but it would be very expensive. The cost of this entire system here is somewhere maybe $3,000 to $4,000, something like that. And one small mistake, and you can end up having to create a whole new permit, have a contractor come out and fix the system for you, at which point any savings you might have realized
out the window
in doing it yourself, it's gone. It's bye-bye. And that's really where the inspector actually becomes a partner. So we kind of don't look at her as an inspector, we kind of look at her as like a service, a contractor who knows the systems and how they work, knows soil types, knows our geographic area. And she provides a lot of education and service to us so that we don't make these mistakes. We don't put the drain field against the hillside, or we don't put it too close.
We also had
there.
our installer and the inspector talk to one another over the phone because they could speak in more professional terms that they understand. I don't know. So that's something that they did a lot of that communication between the two of them, and we weren't involved because we weren't the ones installing it.
Yeah, we had overestimated what we would need for a system size, and so when we were issued the permit, it was massive, and our contractor looked at it and just kind of went, "What? How big of a mansion are you putting on this property?
How many hundreds of children live at your house?"
And we kind of just explained it, and he goes, "Well, you don't need all of that stuff. Let me call the inspector." And so he did, and it was a service for us, so that we were able to have the permit changed, so the system size is much more reasonable, and it's also much more budget friendly. So, you know, there's a lot of hidden lessons there. There's one really important thing that happened to us. This really just kind of like locked it in for us. It just so happened that when a tank like this one, not this tank, was being lifted or backfilled, one of the boulders from nearby here rolled into the tank or dropped into the tank and cracked the tank. And that's one of those mistakes. It was just an accident, but it was actually done by the contractor and not us. Had that been us, in all of our good faith effort to save a few bucks, I think we'd be out the cost of a tank, because I don't know any company that's going to warrant their product against poor installation. And so in that situation, it was Friday afternoon. It was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The guy had to go get a whole nother septic tank.
Which he had, but we wouldn't have had.
In a way, we're thankful that happened to them and not us. We don't wish that upon somebody.
And if that was us too, we probably wouldn't be able to do it that same day, so we'd have to rent an excavator again, which is probably $300 a day minimum.
Yeah, and their excavator was here all weekend because they couldn't get, you know, all the other things that they needed to get because of the weekend. So the point here is, if that would have happened to us, which we don't know that it would have, but if it would have happened, whatever small amount of time or money we would save by doing ourselves would have been out the door, just gone. So that's just one of those very realistic things that can happen in one of these projects, and we wanted to share that with you. That's lessons that are hard learned, and not to mention the timing. Like, winter's coming, we need to get this system in. It's not that we're like panicking, but we don't need any more delays. And if that would have been us, I don't even know. This certainly would have jeopardized our project, because $3,000 to $4,000 of mistakes could really hurt us financially.
I think that brings us to our next bullet point of time. One of the reasons we chose to have a contractor install it is because we're simply running out of time. We've only been here for 2 months. As you know, things aren't moving nearly as quickly as we were planning on, simply because we didn't know what we didn't know. And we needed a little help getting things settled for the winter. Yeah,
and when you have your RV, but it sounds really good, but moving that RV to dump the tank and have the basic necessities, we're talking like food, shower, toilet, all that. It sounds really good, but in practice, when we were doing it, it is very inconvenient.
Yes.
It seemed like the tanks always got full right about the wrong time. Like, say you've worked a long day and you got to go shower. Well, only one of you can shower.
You have
That's
no
a problem.
water. You can't go to the bathroom. It's late. You're hungry. It's 8 o'clock. You haven't eaten yet. You don't want to eat until you're showered and bathroomed.
And sure, there are like what we would call a Bandaid Fix. And we had talked about even using some of these, but we ultimately with this project, we're trying to just do it right the first time instead of like kind of Band-Aid. So some had suggested that we get some tanks and we use those to empty RV and they take those and dump them. That would work. We won't argue that.
But that still costs money. It's still a lot of time. And if you can cough up the $3,000 to $4,000, then you'll just simply have that problem taken care of.
Yeah, and if a septic system isn't practical for you, well, maybe that will work for you. We were definitely not arguing that it won't work. But why spend money on a bunch of containers and things if that's not really where you want to be? Now, if you're planning on permanently RVing, well, then get tanks and just do it that way. Call it a day.
And then another thing as it pertains to winter is we really need to winterize our trailer. We're at the point now where we really need to think about building some sort of enclosure for it, or also putting hay bales around it, and we simply don't want to be moving the trailer all the time to dump it.
Yeah, with the way the system is right now, or our RV, we had to take it to dump the waste tanks, and that was really a pain point for us. We couldn't do any winterizing because we had to move the trailer constantly. So we were really hinging all that on getting this in, and now that that's in, we can actually build enclosures and protect our trailer against freezing because we know that weather's coming. In fact, in a few days, we're looking at some pretty good low temperatures. So it's really critical that, with this strategy that you think about these things. I mean, we didn't plan on being crunched for time, but here we are. Winter's on us, and we need to make sure we can get our trailer protected so we don't have other more problems that we don't need. Also, something to go along with time is the fact that we can get a lot of other work done. In the amount of time that it took our contractors to do this work, we've nearly built our entire hot tub deck. And, I don't think I'd hire a contractor to build our hot tub deck. Not right now, and not at this stage of the project. That's something that we can do. And actually, we're having a lot of fun doing it. We cut our own trees down, made our own lumber. It's really fun. But, this septic isn't something that we really are skilled at. So we'd rather use our skills where we can and unfortunately use money where it's more appropriate.
It goes back to not being a superhero, just picking and choosing what you're going to spend your efforts on any given month.
Yeah, and there's actually a lot of purpose behind our hot tub deck. We don't have time to talk about this video, why that is, but it actually isn't just a hot tub deck. To a lot of folks, probably like, oh, cool, hot tub deck. There's actually a lot of validation going on there. We'll talk about that more in a future video and a future blog post. So the point is we can use our time and skills and resources on other things that we are good at, and then we can let other people, by delegating, let them do these things. So we're not running out of projects, that's for sure.
The next thing we want to talk about is making a gradual transition to this lifestyle. If you're coming from deep within the city, it may be naive to think that you're just going to be able to move to some bare land in a travel trailer and live happily for a year or however long it's going to take. You really need to make the transition gradual and cut yourself a little bit of slack.
Yeah, we came from, different backgrounds, but neither of us were really familiar with how these systems were installed. And so making the gradual transition really sets us up for success. Does this mean that we've slammed the door on all other options? Not at all. We've not said, no, we're never going to compost, or no, we don't want to learn how to use gray water. In fact, we are passionate about learning those things, but at this stage in this journey, it's not practical. This system is how we're most comfortable living. It's something we're familiar with, and it allows us to focus our resources on other things like timber framing, milling
getting
logs, getting a structure, getting a home built, doing solar. There's a lot of other things to be done. So this doesn't close any doors. Really, it just enables us to keep going on this journey, because if it wasn't for this system, it wouldn't be very long before the tension would really increase here on the homestead, and we'd have a lot of other problems, maybe even eventually just kind of break down and give up. So,
and to have these really thriving homes that work really well with the environment and do composting and rainwater collection, we're not talking a year-long project, especially if you're doing it from scratch like we are. We're talking a lifetime.
Yeah, and a lot of these journeys, people get really passionate about all the stuff that they're going to do, but it takes time. I don't care who you are, I don't care how much money you have. If you have all the money in the world, it's still going to take time to get all this stuff done, especially if you're working on a limited budget. So give yourself time, pick and choose the projects that you pay money for, but that you do yourself, and make sure that you don't, just neglect yourself. We've done things like that. We've kind of pushed the envelope a little bit, said we can do without this, and we could do without this, and eventually we're like, nah, we can't do without this.
Only for so long.
Yeah, so, our patience runs out eventually, and we kind of make a decision on what to do. So as it pertains to gradual transition, make sure that you're not setting yourself up for failure. Try to work with a system or a plan that is something you're comfortable with, and then totally rock and roll on a lot of the more alternative ways of living. Like, we would love to learn more about gray water disposal systems, how to use that in our gardens or on our landscaping, etc. How to compost. I mean, it totally makes sense. We're not against that stuff, but right now a compost toilet is a waste of resources for us. We don't have anywhere to put it, and if we did, we'd just take time to put it all up and deal with it all. So this would pull our focus away from other more important tasks. So in the future, we want to look into that stuff. We're totally stoked about it. But for now, this keeps us going on this journey. The last thing we want to talk about was cost. And this is kind of a funny topic because the way we're going to approach this is actually from a common sense perspective, not from like how to save money, which is probably what a lot of people would think we would say. The reality is that this has a physical cost. The materials have a physical cost. Doesn't matter if you buy them or the contractor buys them. And in the end, the margin that the contractor is charging to install this system is not much.
It's pretty minimal.
Maybe $3,000 to $4,000 for this septic system that we have here, which is enough to serve a full household with maybe 2 bedrooms. But if you went to buy these parts yourself and then rent the excavator, and then you make a small mistake, like maybe you do something like the excavator drops a rock on the tank, you put the drain field too close to the hillside.
Or it simply just takes you 3 times as long because you're not used to installing septic systems and running the excavator.
Yeah, or maybe you have a problem, something unforeseen. Whatever nominal cost that you're paying as a markup to the contractor surely will be gone in a flash. So the point is, you aren't like, maybe the contractor charges $4,000. You're not going to go out and put a septic system in for $50. Okay, so there's a physical cost to all these components, and really whatever they're charging us to do, the margin is not going to be worth the risk on our part to go get our own equipment and try to work a lot of this stuff ourselves. So the physical cost is just one thing that makes sense. Think about it. If let's say that we paid them $1,000 total in markup over all of this stuff for their labor, their equipment, their experience, and all that stuff. If we just damaged this tank, just the tank, and we had to replace it, there goes your $1,000. It's long gone. So really think about where you're trying to save money. There are a lot of places you can save money, such as on our hot tub deck. We've done everything ourselves. And the materials that we've had to purchase were very minimal because we learned how to mill our own lumber, etc.
And the mistakes we've made are super detrimental. We're working with free materials to begin with, not really expensive equipment. We've already made little minor mistakes, which we can fudge and fix. So
yeah, if you mess up a board, get another board. It's not a big deal. But if you mess up a septic system, you got a big problem on your hands. If you have to keep an excavator for a couple extra days, that turns into some serious money really quick, which we've had happen. So really weigh out what it is that you're trying to save when you're looking at these systems. And the permit, it wasn't a cheap permit per se, but the information and education that we received from the service provided by the inspector, honestly, if you could even find somebody with their knowledge and skill set, you'd probably pay them more than that.
I'd say our $860 permit saved us thousands of dollars in a potential failed septic system.
Yeah, it was really the service of the inspector that saved us the money. The permit, it's just a piece of paper. It doesn't mean anything. But the service of the inspector was worth all $860 because this system, if it would have failed, again, we'd be out a bunch of money. So the point we really want to convey there is think hard and long about what it is that you're trying to save money on. And don't be foolish. Don't be silly. Don't be a hero, right? So those are some of the things we wanted to share with you in this video. We hope it's helped you maybe learn a little bit about our experiences, some of the things we've made mistakes on, some of the things we've learned already. And ultimately, if you decide or you're already on a journey like ours, that you'll benefit from our experiences. So in summary, this video was why we chose to get a permit and why we chose to have a contractor install our septic system. So hopefully you've benefited from that. In another video, we're going to talk about how septic systems work and what we've learned from this, such as sizing and tanks and drain fields and different types of systems and all that other stuff. But that's really a topic for a different video.
I think the why is really important when starting a journey like this because there's so much information out there and you really need to know what to take and what to leave as it pertains to your particular scenario. So if you enjoyed this video and you want to learn more about our journey of starting an off-grid homestead from scratch, we have a lot of fun projects coming up. We're currently working on milling our own lumber, cutting down our own trees, building our hot tub deck, building fun things like sawhorses and lots of other random projects. Feel free to subscribe to our channel, and then also be sure to check out our blog at peerlivingforlife.com. And we're also on Instagram and Facebook, where we do a lot of microblog posts. We try to feature the cat every once in a while because he really likes to get in our videos as soon as we see the camera out, and we have a lot of fun. So we will see you later.